I will show you a very interesting opening you can play as black against pawn to e4. This is really tricky. We are going to be taking a look at 4 different variations. So this is an opening you can play against e4. So we're going to play e4 and we will play as black the move e5 because then most likely white will play knight f3. We can play knight to c6. And this is an opening we can play against the Italian game. And I am showing you this because one of the most played positions by white is the Italian game. And one of the biggest reasons for this is because, well, let's say we play knight with 6 as black, many beginner chess players like to go for knight to g5. And that's not even beginners. This is like a really famous approach, the fried liver attack, basically, where first of all, white is trying to go for a simple attack here, a fork with the knight, and also if white can, they will just sacrifice the knight there on f7, basically. And we will have a very interesting approach of dealing with this and also punishing white that so many chess players have already fallen for. So basically here right now we do have a little bit of a problem. We have to fix this double attack here on the pawn on f7, which we can easily do with pawn to d5. That's the normal move, the most played move in this variation. And then black plays pawn takes d5, attacking our knight. So yeah, we have to move the knight. And the most played variation here by black is taking here, and that is when you enter the fried liver attack, where white will capture here, you can recapture with the king, and then bam, you get this check. You gotta move your king to the center of the board, basically, because you have to protect his knight, and then knight goes here, and this is very complicated and very fun to play for white, and yeah, black's just always in a lot of trouble. So we are not gonna go for this. We are gonna play d5, and we are gonna let white capture, but now we are gonna confuse them. We are gonna play knight to d4, and most likely they will have never seen this. Almost everybody plays knight takes d5. Some players, like 1 in every 3 games, plays knight to a5. But knight d4, that's a super rare variation that they will most likely have never seen. And the goal here is to bait black into a little trap, bait white into falling for our trap. There are multiple things white can do. We are going to cover all of them, or at least all of the most important ones. The thing we want to try is to get white to play pawn to d6. And this looks very natural, right? Because, well, again, this is opening up the attack. But actually pawn to d6 is not such a good move by white. So that is what we are trying to bait here. If they play pawn to d6, we are going to take this with the queen. And this looks very tempting. Almost every player with the white pieces here will go for knight takes f7, going for this double attack. Or they might also go for bishop takes f7, going for the check. And I'm going to show you those 2 variations. And those are basically the main things you need to know. But there are also other really interesting lines as well. So let's say they take here with the knight. White just instantly loses the game because of a really hard to see move, I think, by white, and that is queen to c6. And queen to c6 both attacks the bishop and also attacks this weak pawn here on g2. And it's light outs for white, basically whatever white tries to play. Yeah, I'm just going to show you a couple of variations. This is the most straightforward. If they take your rook, which happens a lot, you can take here on g2. Now their rook has to move. They will probably go here, and then you can give a check. The king can't go anywhere, so they have to block the check, and this is a beautiful checkmate in 10 moves you can play. It's also possible for them to just sacrifice the queen as well. Then, okay, we don't have a checkmate, but we are still winning the game because of our material. White might also drop back the bishop, thinking that, well, I am very smart. I am both dropping back my bishop, also guarding this pawn here on g2. This loses instantly because of multiple variations. One of them, of course, we can just capture this knight. But the most fun one probably is knight takes c2, giving a check to the king. And if the king steps forward, this is a checkmate. The king can't go anywhere. So basically, if white thinks that they are smart and they play back the bishop, after this, they just have to sacrifice the queen if they don't want to straight up lose the game. And this also leads to problems, of course, because still many pieces are hanging. And I don't think there's much else we could analyze. Yeah, of course, other moves also. We just have this queen g2. And if white just defends this, of course, we can capture here. Let's say they try and capture our rook. There is also still this idea with knight c2. And yeah, the king's just in a lot of trouble here. The king actually can't go anywhere, so the queen has to be sacrificed. So if white goes for this and they capture on f7 with the knight, they are instantly lost. It's also possible, if we play this exact variation, that white goes for this and they capture with the bishop, which is a little bit better actually for white, because first of all we have to move our king, but now things are still tricky. The best thing for white is to move back the bishop, because let's just say they castle and they think they are safe. Well, we just have a simple trick. We attack the knight's got to go somewhere, and they lose the bishop, and that's just it. They lost the piece. So that's a really easy win. If they move the bishop, most likely they are going to go to b3 because, well, there are not many options. Maybe this could also be an option, but then you have to remember we still have this queen c6, and it's the same plan as before. This is game over as well. So the bishop has to go to b3. You can capture the bishop, and now we have a beautiful move as well, which is h6, attacking the knight. And the knight doesn't really have many squares. To be honest, it only really has one good square, which is knight to f3. You can attack it with the e4 pawn, so it has to move again. But if you look at this, like, where is it going to go? Not a lot of squares. Maybe it can go here to the edge, which also just loses the game for white, because we have a really beautiful move, which is king f7. And king f7, now these two escaping squares for the knight were already covered. Now this one is also covered. And no matter what white tries, we will always have g5 and we will win the knight. Okay, the king looks a little bit crazy and goofy here on f7, but still this is winning for black. So yeah, you can basically try and win the knight. If you play pawn to e4, they might also try to be sneaky and pin this with the queen, so that we cannot capture this. But still, king f7, that's your best square for the king. The knight is still under attack, and basically the knight has to go all the way back. And yeah, the position isn't winning because of material, but it's more that white just has a really bad structure. White is really passive, and we can even keep up the attack. For example, bishop g4, and if they play f3, which is a highly played move here, you can basically go for takes, and then, for example, rook to e8, pinning and winning the queen as well. So bishop f7, I would say, is a little bit of a better variation for white if they play all of the best moves and if they are careful. But in many variations you will be able to play for tricks, since white won't know what they are doing, and then, for example, you can try and win the queen as well. Then we have to take a look at a couple of other things as well. We are going to play the same opening, and here you might get a player that is a little bit smarter and realizes that one, d6 is not good, or maybe they have seen this trap and they don't want to play pawn to d6. The best move here, and also a often played move by white, is c3, and this is most often played by players who actually have seen the trap before, or at least the basics of the trap. So they are trying to attack our knight and kind of saying like, dude, why did you put the knight here on d4? There's no reason for the knight to be here. But we do have some tricks that I wanted to show you as well. And we are going to start off with pawn to b5. And basically here white almost always goes wrong. The best move actually for white is to play bishop to f1. And yeah, you're never going to see this probably. So a lot of things that can happen. Of course, capturing here is not possible because, well, the knight would capture the bishop for free. So that doesn't work. So most of the time you're probably going to see the c pawn take. Then you can take. Then they take here. And then now multiple things are possible. The move I prefer is to go and capture with the queen on d5, giving away this knight, and then in exchange we can also capture this knight. Other variations are possible. You can capture with the knight, but I think the most fun variation is to capture with the queen, because basically we are just forcing everything. We are attacking here on g2, we are attacking here on e5. So yeah, white doesn't have a lot of choice. Most of the time they are just going to capture here. Yeah, they can actually, if they want, just go for something like this as well. Because taking here, of course, leads to a little bit of problem for black. So we don't want to go for that. But still, this position is fine. We have checkmate threats. And I don't think you will see this most of the time. White will just capture. You can recapture. And then here, everything is still equal for white, as long as they don't take on g7. So for example, let's say white goes for this. Well, okay, it's always hard for white because white is always going to be the one having to defend checkmate threats. And if you look at this, how are you going to defend this? Yeah, pretty impossible. If you try and do a check, I'm just going to move the king. I still have checkmate. If you play something like g3, you're still not really in a good spot because the bishops are going to come out. The queen can always slide over. We can exchange rooks and black is almost always winning. But most players will capture here on g7. You can recapture with the bishop. They can castle. And then we're just going to go for checkmate with bishop to b7. And again, and it's always the same idea. And these variations, the one thing you have to realize is you don't have to be thinking about castling basically as black. You just want to put your king somewhere, d7, f7, doesn't really matter, and go for the checkmate. And again, white has to defend for the checkmate. You could get g3, you could get f3, both of those are possible, but f3 is a little bit nasty as well because you can give this check here with the bishop, and yeah, after the king moves, for example, rook to g8, I actually think it's a little bit better to put this rook here on g8, and this leads to an inevitable checkmate, because if this is ever defended, you can take it. If it's defended like this, you can actually take here as well, because this would also be a beautiful checkmate here on g8. Yeah, so really not many moves. If they play g3, you can play queen f5, going for this. If they try to defend this, you can basically sack the rook and then give a checkmate here. So I can't cover everything, but believe me, there is a checkmate in every single variation, no matter what white tries. And that is a really important thing to know, because many players that learn this trap only know what to do if white captures on f7. And many players even think that white capturing on f7 is the whole plan, but that's not true. There are so many different plans here. And they basically all boil down to the fact that we are going to destroy the white king. And oftentimes that is by playing bishop b7 and also going for this attack here on the g2 pawn. So really interesting variations. Then one more really interesting variation, and it's really important to know this one as well. That is just the same setup as before. But what if white just ignores everything and white just castles? And this is actually something that hasn't really been studied that much. But still, it's a very interesting position. And almost everybody with black here makes the mistake of trying to capture here, thinking that, well, this is a good variation for black, which is true, of course. But there's a little trick. This can still happen. Queen h5, and yeah. It's not looking too great for black and these lines as well. So, but almost everybody here with black goes wrong. So this is not a really well-known variation. The trick here is to also play pawn to b5 after white has castled. The bishop has to go, but here you don't have to take it immediately if you don't want to. We can play a more solid move, like for example bishop to d6, and then eventually they will probably attack your knight. That's the most played move. Now we are gonna trade, which is fine, and now we are gonna go hunting. We are gonna play pawn to h6, the knight has to go back, pawn to e4, the knight has to move, but again, like, doesn't really have a lot of squares, and knight here is immediately losing as well because of check and check with the knight. Then where is the king gonna go? And then you capture this, and that's checkmate. So the knight's in a lot of trouble. And what to do if the knight moves here? Well, some of you will probably already see it. Again, bishop takes h2, check, queen goes in, and that's it. That's the game. The only defense for white is to sacrifice the queen. And this is not a well-known variation. So if you play for this trap, if you play your knight to d4, those are the 4 things that I think you need to know. First of all, if they play pawn to d6, be really happy, because basically they are falling for the trap. You can capture with the queen. You will be able to slide over and do a lot of really nasty tricks and all variations. If they don't play this, most likely you will get c3 or castles, and then you have to know that still you can completely destroy white. Is this going to work at a really high level? Probably not, because first of all, not everybody is going to play e4, not everybody is going to go for this attack, but I think especially at the lower rating levels, if you know this, you can win a lot of rating just by playing this every time you face pawn to e4 by white. If you enjoyed this, definitely subscribe to the channel so you don't miss my other videos. That's it. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.